Well, first, I would like to thank Elena, Miriam, and Dunia for organization and for inviting us here and giving us the opportunity to come and talk to you. So, first of all, I would like to talk about the technology, where it's going in the recent future, and the advances in artificial intelligence and so on. I'll go through maybe some specific technologies will be mainstream, and we'll talk about the details, the implications on the market, on humanity. And then I'll talk about some aspects of innovation. And then I'll end with my perspectives on how to use innovation, to use organizations to become much more effective and innovative at what they do. So if you look at population of the Earth since the beginning of modern human evolution, about 300,000 years ago, until 1800 approximately, the population of Earth was less than 1 billion, so it was about 950 million people. In the span of 200 years, we went from less than 1 billion to 7.5 billion people. And that trend continues to increase. So continents like Europe, for example, they are declining. Continents like Asia is expecting to stabilize. The biggest contributor to the population is going to be African continent, actually. So the population will continue to increase, and will reach pretty soon about 9 to 10 billion people. So that is a huge population. And it's interesting is, at the same time, we're having an increase in technology that is exponential. It's unprecedented levels. So if you look only at the computational powers that's going to be available in the next 15 years, for example, by 2030, let's say, the computational power is going to be equivalent to one human brain. And if we continue with that trend, the computational power eventually will reach to a point that one computer will be equivalent to billions of people in capability and mental ability. You can imagine the consequences from this happening. So you have huge exponential technology, a lot of advancements. At the same time, we have exponential growth in population, which is something that's interesting. We'll discuss a little bit about it now. So robotics, in the US by itself, by 2050, it's estimated that the robotic market will have an impact of 50 million jobs on the economy. By 2025, that market by itself is going to be 70 billion. So robotics are advancing more and more. At NASA, for example, we have Robonaut 2, and it's a robot that is very dexterous. It can use the hands to move things and shake hands and do maneuvers with it. The robotic market is increasing a lot. It's becoming very advanced. And if we continue on this, in 50 years, approximately, plus or minus, robotics will be so advanced it will be very difficult to distinguish a human being from a robot. So, but that by itself is not enough. So if we have a robot that looks like a human, that has capabilities to act like a human and use the infrastructure that humans do, it's something that can impact maybe the labor market. And that's a discussion we had a long time ago when we, at the beginning of the century with the Industrial Revolution, we thought the equipment, the machineries, the automation will have significant impacts on jobs. It turned out not to be true. A lot of the jobs were reshuffled from one place to another, and the job market continues to grow. The problem here now is intelligence, artificial intelligence combined with these robots. That's when we're creating a new paradigm. So imagine a computational power of billions of people in a brain and a robot that looks like humans. And we're talking about essentially creating a new species here. So it's completely game-changing technology that will have significant impact on everything that we do. So experts will argue that every time there is a technology, it will create new jobs. And most of the cases, that is the case. The problem here is we're not creating a technology. We're creating almost, like I said, a new species that will compete in a lot of the jobs that humans do. So that is something that a lot of scientists and world thought experts and leaders argue both ways. 50% will say it will have a positive impact on jobs and creation on economy. And the other 50%, it will have a negative, substantial negative impact. We always often have discussions about all kinds of jobs. And we can essentially have an intelligent argument about how most of the jobs today could be replaced by artificial intelligence. You can replace lawyers, medical doctors, engineers, drivers, accountants. It's so much that the number of jobs that can be impacted. There will always be jobs that will only humans can do, of course. So the key is here, what are these jobs and how can we capitalize on them and do them better? At the same time, you know, computational power advancements in robotics are advancing. So today, for example, we have gloves that we're having at work. You can wear gloves and you become much stronger. You can do things for thousands of times without getting tired. You can wear lenses that you can actually take pictures with. You can use augmented reality glasses and do so many things. So as technology advances, we're trying to implement and integrate a lot of these technological systems into our bodies. The question is, in 25 years, in 50 years, how close we'll be to cyborgs, how more integrated we'll be. Science fiction often refers to these kind of things, but the way the trends are going, I think there will be a lot of wearable devices us as humans will be actually putting together. So what needs to happen here is we need to work with academia, with government agencies, and industry as well. What can we do? How, if you look at the next 10 jobs, 10 years, for example, and 10 years from now, they estimate that 60% of the job do not exist today. So how do you graduate skills and workers for jobs that don't even know what the jobs will be? So we need to actually reevaluate the whole educational systems. Academia, industry, and government need to work together to start looking into how can we actually adapt fast and strategize about the main jobs in the future and start using the adequate skill work that will actually be able to have an impact in the economy and continue to drive the economy and job growth. So why are we interested in innovation at NASA? So if you look at this map here, essentially what we had is the last few years we retired the Space Shuttle program. And the Space Shuttle was intended to build a space station, which is the best national lab that we have. It's a substantially expensive and very complex effort put together internationally by so many different nations. So that mission was completed. There was no more point to keep spending on the Space Shuttle. So we retired the Space Shuttle, and we're concentrating on going to deep space. So the next destinations we're thinking about are going to be Moon, Mars, and asteroids. Right now, things seem to point toward Mars. So by finishing this, we actually enabled the commercial space industry to go into low Earth orbit. So because of the technologies that were developed by NASA, we actually enabled a lot of these new entries into the market. You hear about SpaceX, Orbital, Blue Origin, and so on. So all these companies were able to capitalize about the vast amount of technology and innovation that we created throughout the years. And they're taking it and recreating a new economy and the business out of that, which is flourishing substantially. Another thing, actually, if you look at what's happening in the recent future, the technology is becoming smaller, miniaturization of things. So nowadays, you don't need a satellite that's almost the size of a car and to launch it, and something's going to last you 20, 30 years in orbit. You can build a small satellite that looks like a small cube and launch it at a fraction of the price and do a lot of the work that you need. So that thing by itself, miniaturization of hardware and cheap access to space, is creating a new wave of startup companies all across the world. So because of these are the fertile grounds that needed for these new entries into the market. And there is a lot of gaps still that people can go into venture and create new business lines and becoming a completely new area that we haven't expected in the last decade or so. So to do that, to go to Mars, it's going to be extremely challenging. It's extremely difficult and risky, complex, expensive. So we need to think creatively, think out of the box. How can we actually do things cheaper, better, faster? How could we align with international alliances to make these endeavors, these complex endeavors, possible in the near future? So if you look also at the government, NASA, for example, how was the contribution into the economies? We look at they were concentrating on the aeronautics field. So out of that came out Boeing, Airbus, and Lockheed. So by itself, this aviation industry is $1 trillion industry right now, creating millions of jobs. The same thing is, like I said, with putting together all this technology. The commercial space industry by itself is about $330 billion in 2014 and expected to continue growing. And more small startups are starting to come into the market and will be completely game changer. So there is a lot of technologies that will be mainstream. I can point tens and tens of those. Some of them is near term, some of them is a little bit further in the future. But we talked about miniaturization. Just to show you a quick example here. So this is a 5 megabytes. 5 megabytes in 1956. So you can appreciate the difference between that and what we have right now. And then go 10 years from now. I mean, it's amazing the advancements and progress we're having in the scientific field. 3D manufacturing, it has implications in everything we do. For space, for example, we're really interested in 3D manufacturing because once we send humans to Mars or to a remote location, we cannot afford to send all the spare parts with us. And to get new spare parts, it's going to be a very complex endeavor to do. So what we can do, we can send a file electronically, and then we can use the sand from Mars or sand from the moon, for example, to create the feedstock for the 3D manufacturing and be able to manufacture things on the spot. In the medical field, we're talking about essentially 3D printing organs. So 3D printing organs in the food industry, we're talking about printing food, 3D printing food. Now the clothing industry, the clothing stores. So in the future, you'll go to a store, there will be some equipment, some technology that will scan you, 3D scan, and do the measurements that you have. And you choose what colors and what you want as a shirt and walk around, have a coffee. By the time you finish, you'll have your brand new printed shirt or clothes or pants or whatever it is, right? So we're talking about completely different future. And that's not too far away from now. It's actually, it's going to happen sooner than you think. Now let's concentrate a little bit more on driverless cars. Driverless cars is a very fascinating thing. And I decided to take just this example to dig deeper into it, so tell you that each one of these technologies have vast implications on everything we do as humanity. And I'll go a little bit more than that. So one day, when I was in California and working at NASA Ames, so I was grabbing a coffee from a coffee shop, and I got out and I saw this very weird-looking car with so many equipment and things rotating. I said, man, what is that thing? So I found out it was one of the Google cars, the driverless cars that were actually driving around. And the thing with driverless cars, the way it does it, it's you need to develop algorithms. So the more information you have, the more you drive, the finer the algorithms you have, and the better job you can do at maneuvering and doing things. So there is a study by Harvard University. They estimate in the United States by itself, in the lifespan of humans, you spend about 40,000 hours behind the wheel just driving. So imagine how much time is wasted with that. So if we find a way for new generations to take that impact away and have saved them 40,000 hours, imagine how much productivity that will have on the market, how much that will improve the economy. You can do so many things with that. It's unbelievable. Another goal from the driverless cars is to have zero accidents. The human is always the weakest link here. If we take that human elements from the loop, I think we'll reach a point where things are significantly safer, and the end goal is hopefully to reach no accident, zero accident with that thing here, with the driverless cars. When you have, in the States, for example, again, we have 2 cars per family. So there is absolutely to have no cars per family. The way you use car, I take my car, I drive to work, and it's 90% of the time parked in the garage, in the parking lot. So what's the point of having a car? So the thing is, you'll have one car, and it will start calculating algorithms based on how many people it needs to drive, the times, and with artificial intelligence, and can start evaluating what's the best conditions for transportation. So there is absolutely no need to have one car, more than one car per family. And the next step, we're talking about having small fleet of cars per neighborhoods. So that will completely revolutionize the amount of cars, and you will not see as many cars in the streets. So that will have huge implications on environment. So there is no, the least car that we have, the better the environment will be, and that will be something good for the planet. Now traffic. So traffic is two aspects. First of all, we're going to have less cars. So the least cars we have, obviously we have less traffic. But not only that, when you're driving on a freeway, you can ride at 140, 150. So cars could be significantly closer to each other, going much, much faster. Because even 2 or 3 kilometers ahead, cars will be communicating with each other. So if there's a problem, there's something, cars will automatically start synchronizing with each other and start dropping down in speed. So you can go faster. In a sense, you can actually create less traffic jams and get there faster. So from all these, traffic will be something of the past, I believe. Something interesting is, now we have this technology, for example. Right now, there's driverless cars outside here. I get into this car, I go to the freeway, and the car drives at 140 kilometers. Psychologically, it's going to be a big deal, because we're not used to that. We need to have control. So imagine you get into a vehicle that's driving by itself. You have absolutely no control, go on at such a high speed. And so I think people will have an anxiety attacks from that, will be very anxious. Now, the new generations that have grown up with that will be normal things for them. But the older generation, like us, it will be a little bit different to get acquainted and used to these kind of things. So another thing is older population. When people get to a certain age, they cannot drive anymore. So their driver license is being taken away. So and that's actually have a big impact on them, right? So if we can find a way to have cars that can take all these people to different places, different destinations, without having to rely on other people, I think that'll be huge for the older population as well. So ethics is, I would say, the most complicated issue here, even more than technology itself. So if you're riding one of these cars and you have a baby on the side, or a bus full of babies and then a bus for adults, so you have to hit one of them. Which one do you hit, the adults or the babies? Or if you're driving and there's a passenger kind of crossing the street, which one has priority, the person in the car or the person outside the car? Which one do you save? So these are very, very complex issues. And we've had several discussions, and every time we have a discussion, there's always arguments and controversies. So I think, in my opinion, that will be one of the most challenging issues that we need to resolve, is the ethics of it. And then, because once we have the rules, that will be the rules that we'll implement for the future. And it will probably be something applies across different nations as well. So new services. So once you have the driverless cars, new services will come into play here. So we'll have maybe entertainment, new entertainment technologies will come for people because now they're not driving, they can do more things, right? So what type of services will be able to do? Maybe people are talking about having food services as well. You can have maybe certain things to cook food or whatever, right? We're talking about very interesting things. So the cool thing here, I see that as an opportunity. So this is an opportunity where a lot of startups can come in and start thinking about these today, not when driverless cars are already in the market. So today we know the driverless cars is a sure thing. There's no doubt. Now start thinking about industries, technologies that can actually tailor as services to these companies. And if you start right now, you'll be ahead of the curve. You'll be very successful and penetrating this market and this industry as well. Safety. So these cars, like I mentioned, when I saw the first car, there were so many things coming out of it and rotating and shining things and producing energies. So when you have several cars in the street, that's not a problem. But when you have millions of cars driving every day back and forth, we need to understand what are the implications of these energies that are coming from these cars on the long-term human health. That's something we need to understand properly because we don't want to solve the problem and create other problems in the future. Now let's talk about the impacts. How does driverless car can impact the economy? So if you are kind of manufacturers and you're used to manufacturing millions of cars per year, and suddenly there is a need only for a fraction of that, so how would that impact the manufacturing industry? People need to start thinking about it today. And the thing is, with supply and demand, and then if we only need very, very small amount of cars, then obviously the price of the car is going to go very high. So how do we do that balance? How that balance is going to look like? That's something definitely needs to be looked at. Insurance companies, if my car never gets into an accident, I know all the time where my car is, so why do I need to insure my car? There's probably not that much. First of all, you will have less cars to insure because there will be a fraction of the cars. And second is that people needing insurance will probably diminish substantially. So insurance companies will also have to think about changing their business model to adapt to the new technologies coming into the market. Now hotels. So hotel industry, you see driverless cars in a hotel and you see them completely unrelated. But in fact, for example, you go to Odessa to spend the night and then go there the next day to work. So you get into your car and you sleep in the car because you're not driving, right? You can even sleep, go there, do your job and come back no matter what the time is. If you get tired, just go to the back seat and sleep. So how is that going to impact the hotel industry, right? So again, all these things need to be put into consideration and discussed as well. Parking in big cities also will be not needed because there's no need for driverless cars. And if that's the case, it could be adapted and readjusted to be used for something else. So that will be an advantage. So these are just some of the things I kind of thought of top of my head a while back. But there is other implications. That tells you one single technology like this, how much impacts on all these elements that we talked about in terms of improvements, in terms of challenges, and so on. Obviously, the most important thing is going to be cybersecurity. Without having a robust cybersecurity, none of these technologies will be possible. Imagine you're driving in a car, the car is driving you somewhere, and somebody hacks into it and take you somewhere. So how is that going to happen, right? So we need to have infrastructure, technology, and security that are actually paramount, and in order to be able to secure all these new technologies. Now, I'm going to talk quickly about some change topics, talk about some different elements of innovation. So I'll start with disruptive innovations. There are so many technologies have disrupted the whole market. And I'm just actually going to talk quickly about Zara and Netflix. So Zara, anybody uses Zara to shop around here? Yeah? So Zara, when it started, people thought it's not going to be successful. The clothing industry is one of the most competitive industries in the market. And when Zara came in, they thought about it and they said, okay, how can we make a difference? How can we do something that nobody else is doing? So what they did is, if in a conventional clothing industry, it takes about a year between a designer designs something and between the time it hits the shelves. It's approximately 1 year. Now Zara does that, the whole thing, in 2 weeks. It does that, and then also it creates an element of scarcity. It doesn't produce a lot of the garments at the same time. So it creates 5 of these shirts, 5 of these shirts, 5 of these shirts. So it creates a sense of scarcity. So that means a shirt that I have, not a lot of people are going to have it. And they do something interesting is they collect substantial feedback from customers that come to the stores. So when you're at the store, they ask you, hey, what do you think about this shirt? They get you feedback, and they talk to as many people as possible. They send all that feedback to their headquarters. They analyze the data. And if there is trends that a lot of people like certain models, certain designs, 2 weeks later, we'll have new designs based on the feedback from the people. So you can see it's a huge shift from the conventional apparel industry. And right now, Zara has 2,000 stores across the world, everywhere. Now, Netflix, in my opinion, it's fascinating, not because they're innovative in the way they do it, but also don't be satisfied. If you are successful, keep moving and keep moving forward. So when the technology was archaic, we used to do the VHS cassettes to watch movies. And in the States, if you are late, you used to have to pay a late fee. And in my case, almost every single time I had to pay a late fee because I never could go there in time and return it. So renting a cassette was costing me so much money just to watch a movie. So it was actually an issue that a lot of customers were complaining about. So when the DVD industry was developed, then Netflix developed a brilliant distribution scheme. So they put distribution schemes across different cities, and within 1 to 2 days, you order it online and you get your DVD to the house. Now, something different that they did, they created a subscription model for the first time. So you don't rent one by one. You create a subscription that you rent it, and then you get 1 or 2 or 3 per month, or 3 at the same time. They created so many different models, and basically it was impressive. They went to Blockbuster to offer to talk about discussions for acquisition and so on, and they weren't interested. And eventually Blockbuster went out of business because of that. Another thing, so Netflix at that time was the top leader in the market. It was acquiring customers substantially, while Blockbuster and Hollywood Video was going down at a very fast slope. So what they did is they were not satisfied because customers are very impatient. They want things fast. They want things right now. So at that time, the broadband industry came on. So they started actually streaming the movies. So instead of waiting for a movie to arrive by mail, you could go to the web page and watch the movie online on the spot immediately. And again, they became extremely successful, and they were doing a great job. But they were not satisfied because they anticipated if we stay in that domain, that's a domain that could have competition, or somebody else can come and break us apart. So what they did is reinvented themselves again, and they became a production company. So now Netflix is a production company. They produce so many series, so many movies, and they're winning Oscars. That tells you how good they are. And that's a perfect example how being successful is not enough. You have to always be innovating and going ahead of the competition to be able to make it into this challenging environment. Now, as corporations and big companies, they need to watch out what happens in the startups, the small startups, because small technology could have a huge impact on the whole market, could disrupt a whole industry. Like we talked about, for example, Airbnb disrupting substantially the hotel business. Uber disrupting completely the taxi industry, and there's tons of examples like that. So big corporations have to be smart, have to look into what's going on with the small players and small garages, and either acquire them early or do alliances with them or do something, because you cannot afford to neglect small startups anymore. With the technology, with the way things are going, you could actually, one small startup could disrupt the whole industry. So people talk about creativity. Is being creative something you are born with or something you learn? Obviously, some people are more creative by nature than others, but creativity is something you can substantially learn and become much more effective at it. For myself, for example, I've taken a lot of graduate certificates from Stanford. I read publications, books. I worked with people that were very creative, and all these things make big impact, make you even think better. So if you want to be creative, if you want to be more innovative, I think there are definitely ways to do that, and it's not necessarily something you were definitely born with. So let me give you a quick example about creativity. So there's a company in Holland that they sell very advanced bicycles. They are electronic bikes with a lot of sensitive equipment, and I think they were estimating 50% of these bikes were having damage every time they were delivered. Because of the shipping, they were being rough on them. So with the shipping, they were getting substantial damages. So they thought about how can we reduce that. They thought about so many solutions, and one of the guys thought, what if we actually package the bike as if it was a TV? So by just changing the box, the design of the box, they were able to reduce the damage by 70 to 80%. So it doesn't cost them anything, just being able to to think creatively. Look at the huge amount of reduction in damage that they got. Now, innovation sometimes comes from nature. We don't have to go far. You can look at how nature behaves and reacts, and you can actually learn a lot from it. So a few years ago, I was in Japan, and we went to a lotus farm. And I noticed actually the lotus leaves, the water never sticks to it. It keeps flowing back and forth, which is fascinating. So one of the professors that I was with, he told me actually some Japanese scientists looked at the microstructure from the leaf, and they found how it's composed. And they went and they created yogurt lids that actually nothing gets stuck to them. You know, if you eat yogurt, every time you open, there's something stuck to it, right? So by doing that, they were able to solve that problem by something simple. Just looking at nature to do that. You know, biomimicry by itself, I think there are hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of innovation that we use, things that we use in our daily life that came purely from nature. So let me quickly talk about cross-industry innovation. Basically, innovation, we're combining different industries. So in Africa, they were one of the developing countries in Africa was getting donations, incubators for kids. And these incubators were state-of-the-art, excellent technology, the best. They were used to save small kids' lives. The problem is, whenever you had a failure, they had no spares. So you put them in storage, and that was the end of it. So that was a big shame, you know, because these were amazing, expensive equipment, and there was no way for them to keep using it and producing the results that they were using for. So what they did is a group of engineers went there, and they found that this specific Toyota car, four-wheel drive, was the most popular car and the most commonly car used in that country. So what they did is redesigned a new incubator based on parts that were derived from the car. So if you have a spare, something is wrong, something is broken, you go to the junkyard or you go to the dealership, get a new part and replace the damage that you had in your incubator. And that was able to have substantial benefits, actually, to everything they did there. So this is another interesting story about cross-industry, how different industries connect lines and create products. So this is a car mechanic from Argentina. So one day they were having dinner at a party, and they were drinking wine, and they were opening the bottle of wine, and they noticed that the cork got inside instead of going up. So they started betting who can get the cork out of the bottle without breaking the bottle. So several people tried, and nobody was successful. So eventually this guy brought a plastic bag, put it inside the bottle, wrapped it, inflated it, and was able to get the cork out of the bottle. And he won the bet. He went home and he started thinking about what he did. And then he had a gynecology friend that he had. So he started talking to his gynecology friend about, this is what we did, what else can we use it for? And the result was inventing something that was used in developing countries to help with the childbirth. And this little thing was able to save so many people. by having very simple technology, was derived by a car mechanic at a party drinking wine. So sometimes, you see things happen out of nowhere if you know how to connect the dots. So combining innovation, look at, for example, the Coke can and the bottle. And for the bottle, you need a bottle opener. Sometimes you don't find bottle openers anywhere. So they came up with this idea where you actually combine the mechanisms of opening a can to a bottle, and it's very simple. So you can open it without having actually to have a bottle opener for that. And this is an interesting example. So there is a bakery in New York. They created the Cronut, which is a combination of donut and croissant. So combining things create, products that are very essential. There is also so many examples of combining things. So you don't even have to think very far. You see two things and you combine them together. You create a new product. And that product will be substantial. You can have so much benefits to everybody. So open innovation is something that we've been capitalizing on substantially at NASA. It's very, very essential. Let me give you a quick example by Harvard. So there was a way Harvard was interested in doing algorithm for nucleotide sequencing. So they worked on it for years. They spent multiple $1 million, and they were able to produce something that was 70% accurate. Spent $2 million approximately on that. And then the time it took for the sequencing was 4.3 hours. So they weren't satisfied with that. They said, that takes a long time. That's not very accurate. Let's see if we can actually do something different. So what they did is they hired 2 postdocs, and they paid about $120,000 at that time. And they were successful. They were able to increase the accuracy from 72 to 77 and reduce the time to 47 minutes. But then with the emergence of open platforms, of open innovation, they said, okay, let's put this challenge in the market. Let's see what happens out there. So they put this challenge in the open market, and look at the fascination that happened is they got an algorithm that was able to solve it with 80% accuracy. It took only 16 seconds, and the whole cost was $6,000. And the interesting thing, the person that solved it was not from the medical industry, was completely unrelated to that field. If you notice, most of the solutions will often come from industries that are completely divergent, nothing to do with what you're working on. Because when you are an engineer, for example, you are, let's say, an automotive engineer, all you're thinking is about the environment. You have similar thinking. All of you guys have group thinking. If you're working as a doctor, you think as a doctor, all the group thinking. So when you throw an idea and you have people have a group of people from different backgrounds looking at it, you will come with solutions that you will never expect ever that you're going to get them. So it's very important that you reach to people outside of your industry, and we'll talk a little bit more as well. So let me give quick perspectives on innovation based on what I've learned and things I can share with you, how to make organizations better. If you have a business, how to make it more successful, and so on. So in terms of innovation, there is 2 kinds of innovation. There is evolutionary innovation, and there is revolutionary innovation. So evolutionary innovation is, for example, your smartphones. Your smartphones, if you notice, every year you have the 4S, you have the 5S, you have the 6S, whatever the heck it is. It keeps improving, but it's not drastically, right? It's just a little bit. All you're doing just increasing the memory by a little bit, making it a little bit faster, improving the quality of the camera, but you're not really doing innovation. It's just basically improving the products a little bit. Now, revolutionary is what happened between having dial phones or the old little phones, the square phones, to the smartphones. Now, that was revolutionary innovation. And it's very expensive, and it's very challenging, and the success rate is very, very small. The problem is, the thing is, it will be very, very impactful if you do it. So when it comes to innovation, and companies typically, I recommend don't put your eggs in one basket, because innovation is has very high success, very high failure rate. So don't try to diversify as much as possible, because if you put everything in one element, one criteria, in one model, in one line, it will be very probable that you will fail often. So you need to diversify it as much as you can to be able to be successful in what you do here. So, and to do that, because innovation is frustrating, it takes a long time for good innovations to become successful. You need to make sure that every now and then you choose one innovation that's going to be simple. It's not going to be complicated. Because psychologically, you'll get frustrated after a while, trying and failing, trying and failing. So you have to every now and then give yourself a break and try to shoot for small innovations, not something very, very high. And that will help you a lot in the long term. Now, also it's very important to validate the key business assumptions early. Any of you familiar with the company called Zappos, the shoes company? Yeah. So Zappos actually, they applied this concept perfectly. So the intention from what they were trying to do was to sell shoes on a web page. So what was the fundamental assumption? The fundamental assumption is, will people buy shoes online? I mean, shoes is something that's actually very personal. People like to wear it, walk with them, have the feel, how they look like, how they feel. So there was a lot of concern that will people buy shoes online? So to validate the early assumptions in the cycle, instead of spending millions of dollars building web pages, doing warehouses filled with shoes and spending so much time and money, what they did, they got a credit card, they went to a shoe store, and they bought a whole bunch of shoes. And then they created very simple, very primitive web page. And then they went to Google. They bought some advertisement from Google, Google AdWords. And then they went into the market. And actually, they found that they were very successful. And people were buying shoes left and right. So actually, this company, Zappos, ended up being acquired by Amazon. That tells you it's perfect execution. People talk often about success rate of startup is very low, 9 out of 10 fail. But I mean, in my opinion, I don't think it's the case. There are certain elements you can do, and if you follow them, you'll increase your success rate by orders of magnitude, substantially more. And it's not that difficult to discuss these things. So employees usually in companies, I found that they are broken into two parts. Some employees are considered farmers, and some employees are considered hunters. Farmers is, give me my task, I'll go in the corner, I have nothing to do with anything, don't mess with me, I'll finish my task and give it back to you. Hunters are people that are always jumping from one place to another, talking to these people, going there, getting something from here. But the problem with hunters, they never finish a task. So they keep doing so many things and then nothing gets finished, nothing gets completed. So if you want to be successful, you have to find a perfect balance between farmers and hunters, put them together, and that will drastically change the way things are happening in the company. Now, when it comes to ideas, it's very essential that make people feel that they are part of the team. I mean, when you become a director, a manager, an executive, obviously you can tell people what to do. But I never do that. I like to explain to people basically why are we doing that and get their inputs and make them feel part of the solution, part of the problem, part of the design. Because that way they feel they are part of the team and when they're working on something they are a part of, as opposed to being part of something for somebody else's product. So psychologically, it's very essential, very important that actually bring the employees and make them feel part of what's going on and they have vested interest. Because that's the difference between management and leadership. If you use that one, you'll be leading people as opposed to managing people. If you lead people, you'll have much better results. So for innovation, it's very important to have brainstorming sessions. And brainstorming, you have to do two things. So that you have to build a multidisciplinary team. A multidisciplinary team has to be different people, different backgrounds, different ages, different educational level, different ethnicities, different everything. The more diverse, the better. If you have an engineer, a lawyer, a business person, an artist, somebody from China, somebody from India, somebody from the States, somebody from Europe, the ideas you will get and the solutions, you will never, ever get ideas like that if we were a homogeneous group of engineers, homogeneous group of doctors, and so on. So the group dynamics is very important to you select and try to diversify your group as much as possible. Now, when it comes with ideas for the brainstorming, quantity is very important initially, more than quality. And you have to be careful not to judge any person, any ideas. So if you give me an idea, I tell you, no, it's not going to work. We're talking, getting ideas. No, that's not going to work. So what happens is you're going to stop. You're going to shut down. You're not going to give us more ideas. But what I told you, you know what? I like your idea. Actually, we can combine it with your idea, and we can mix it with the idea that is doing there, and we'll produce an excellent product. So by that, you create a positive environment that actually people are contributing more. And obviously, there will be a phase where you go through everything else, and you determine which things make sense, which things doesn't make sense. But at this stage, you have to do it that way. So use yes and. It's a key here to keep flowing and making sure you come up with creative solutions. Failure is not an option. That's something we hear all the time. And in my opinion, failure is totally an option. Actually, that's how we learn from a lot of the things that we do. We learn, we make mistakes, and we learn something, we make next things better. So it's very important. Now, there is a difference between failing in a lab environment and between failing when you have a rocket on the launch pad with people on it. Now, at that time, failure is totally not an option, so it's definitely different concepts. So if you look at Thomas Edison, he said, yeah, I haven't failed, I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. I just want to share also something about psychology and encouraging people. So Thomas Edison came from home one day with a note from his school. And he gave the note to his mother, and his mother read the note. And she told him, you know what, the school is actually sending me this note. They're saying that you are too smart for your classmates. I mean, you have superior intelligence. And that school doesn't have the capability to keep you there. So we're going to have to homeschool you to actually can bring you up and make sure you get all the time that you require. So he went and he got homeschooled, and he became one of the best inventors of our time. You know, Thomas Edison, you can attribute so many inventions to him. So as time passed, his mother died actually, and one day he was going through her stuff, and he found the specific note that actually was given to him by the school so many years ago. And he read the notes, and the note was saying, your son is mentally challenged. He has actually a problem. He will never be able to graduate from school. We can't keep him in this school here. So imagine, but what his mother did, it's the same person, right? I mean, it's no different. Just the note, what the note says is different. By having positive attitude and encouraging people and making them believe in themselves, you can create amazing stuff. I can, you know, as you go in life, you'll find so many people will tell you, this is too difficult for you. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, man, that's for smart people. You can't do that stuff. I can tell you right now, each and every one of you here, you can do absolutely anything you want. If you put time, effort, and energy into it, there is no limitations to the human power, to anything you can do. So as the Chief Innovation Officer, that is by far the most frustrating thing I've ever encountered. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. You come and say, what? Nothing wrong with it. You know, why do we need to improve it? And that is very, very frustrating. There is always room for improvement, no matter what you do. You know, we say, well, if that was the case, you know, people will be riding in horses to work. You know, nothing was wrong with horses. So why do something different? Or look at the cars from earlier in the century. We were driving maybe 10 miles, 10 kilometers per hour. So you always room for improvement. You have to improve. If it makes sense, look into it. You can modify it, make it better all the time. Benchmark outside of the industry. So I try to at least once a month go to different industries. I talk to the medical industry, I talk to oil and gas, I talk to automotive industry, to the IT industry, I benchmark, I talk to them. First of all, I see what solutions do they have, what problems do they have, what solutions do I have, what problems do I have, and try to match them together, basically. I can capitalize on some of the solutions they have, and they can capitalize on some of the solutions that we have, and building this synergy between everything we do. And also looking at the governance models, you know, look how people govern, how the models that they use for running the companies, the corporations, and learn from them. That might be something you can actually adapt and use in your company. So risk is very important. You know, anything you do, you have to take risk. Now the key is, how do you reduce the risk as much as possible? Take measured risk is the key, but you can never minimize risk if you want to do something exciting and interesting. So I had the conference, organized a conference about a few months ago, and last September actually. I invited 50 executives from all over the world. Executives from the Chief Innovation Officers from L'Oreal, from Google, from Senior Vice President from Samsung, Toyota, Head of Academic Institutions. And so we were talking about what can we learn from each other, what successes do you have, how do you harvest innovation, how can we learn from failures, how can we learn from successes, can we transfer these things from one industry to another. It was a fascinating discussion. I think it was excellent, the conference. But one of the guys, the president from Toyota, actually mentioned something interesting here. He said, if executives say this will be a success, you have to pay attention. If they say, oh, this is going to be totally fail, then maybe that something's going to be successful. It's completely the opposite. And he was referring to the Prius, the Toyota Prius. So Toyota Prius is one of the most successful cars Toyota ever had. And most of the executives at that time were completely against it. They were totally opposing to it. They didn't want to do it, and turned out to be completely wrong. It was the best decision they've done in a long time. So that tells you sometimes there is a big disconnect between executives and middle management and different levels as well. Management cycle. So, for example, I've seen new employees when they come to the company, they often look at directors, executives, at managers as role models. So if you have a bad manager, if you have bad director, if you have bad executives, that behavior will be mimicked by younger employees because they think this is the behavior that I need to adapt to become successful at the company. So if you ever have a chance to do something about it, pay close attention, and you don't want that cycle to keep repeating. You're creating bad habits over and over and over. And unfortunately, when things go wrong, design, research and development and innovation are the first thing that companies slash, and that's a big, big issue. Because when things go wrong, this is the best time to start investing in research, development, and innovation. Because by the time things become well, you're already ahead of the competition in everything that you do, and you develop product that nobody else was able to do because people were slashing their budgets. So that's why people, smart companies, actually they shelter their research, development, and innovation completely different places, different units, physically actually in different locations to make sure they remain good. Now, I like to benchmark, like I said, to different companies, and one of the companies I go to typically is Google in Silicon Valley. And the minute you step in the floors of Google, you feel different. Everything is designed in such a way that inspires you to create, to talk, to collaborate. And they tell you, actually, you cannot force innovation on somebody. But you can actually, what you can do is create an environment in which innovation is allowed to exist. So everything they do and the way they create ideas, you can actually come up with an idea, discuss it with the manager, and in no time you'll have budget. It'll give you 20% of your time to start working on it. So the whole environment, not only from a physical environment, from the governance environment as well, they do an excellent job in creating innovation. Pushing innovation, sometimes executives will tell you, we want to do innovation, let's do it. And then you have amazing ideas coming from employees. Everything stops at the middle management. So, because every time you take innovation, there's always a risk element that you need to take. And people don't feel comfortable, doing something new, something risky. So I think a way to do that, executives actually should put it into performance evaluation, that middle management should actually are required to be able to produce certain innovative things. And if you solve that thing, then you have a complete engine going from the executives to the employees, creating ideas and moving forward in the organization. But you need to be careful to the middle management because that's where most of the things finish. So I don't know if you recognize this handsome guy here on the right. So that's supposed to be me. My daughter drew me when she was 4. And actually the good thing about that we would like to share is kids they will never be embarrassed to share anything with you. They can draw the craziest drawing and share it with you and be proud of that. And that is the thing that you need to create. That's the environment you need to create in your organization. Never have people feel embarrassed to share an idea, even if it is crazy. So the crazier the idea, the better. Maybe it's not adaptable, it's not usable. You put it on the side, and you say, no, this is an interesting idea. Thanks for sharing it with us. We'll look into it and see what we can do. As opposed to saying, no, what the hell are you thinking? This is a bad idea. Completely change. So it's very important that you create that environment, that synergy between employees and enable people to share with no restraints anything that they can do. So the environment is very, very important. Today we had a talk at the business school, one of the universities. It was impressive how innovative it was. So one day, I'll share a quick anecdote with you guys. We were in a company discussing things, and we're sitting in a very formal environment in a table. And the discussion was extremely formal, and we weren't getting anywhere. It's just kind of very weird discussion. So we decided to take a break and go to get some coffee. They had one of these amazing coffee machines. You can make yourself cappuccinos, get some snacks. We went there, we started making coffee, and the discussion changed 100%. I thought I was talking to different people, not the same people were with me within 15 minutes. So the environment itself, it has a significant influence on innovation and creativity, on being comfortable sharing ideas. And so it's very important to create an environment, physical environment, to do that as well. Just a couple of charts left. So when strategizing about the future, people typically, when they think about the future, they think about the limitations we have in today's technology. So I often like to invest in things that have not been invented yet. So there is ways to do that. So that you look at, for example, intellectual properties, where it's going, research papers, where our venture capital is investing, and you get data points. And essentially, you can use all data points to estimate approximately what's the next industries and economy is going to look like in 10 years or so, and start investing in them today, right away. And like I said, build synergies, collaboration between different teams, academia, government, industry. There's substantial value from doing all that stuff. So no matter what we do, if all of us are working in amazing stuff, imagine if we put our collective intellect together as different industries and different companies and academic institutions. I think the limitations will be boundless, and we'll be able to achieve things we've never been able to do before. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and thanks for coming here.
Thank you very much for such an immersive experience, and all these insights are very useful. I believe that many of those guys and girls, they have some questions, and I will gladly translate those to you if necessary.
Sure.
Yes? Є в когось питання? Якщо ні, то я з радістю задам. So, the first part of the presentation was very much connected to the future of humanity as a whole.
Right.
And do you have any information about the study or, I don't know, maybe some insights or research that is related to psychological and even more emotional implications that humanity might face because of everything speeding up, lack of control, the exponential growth of opportunities and physical abilities?
Yeah. So I think sometimes, for example, just having the smartphones, the thing is technology is advancing incrementally that we're getting used to everything that's happening. So just go back 25 years, for example. If you had a smartphone suddenly, you'll think you just landed from a different planet, right? I mean, it's just the fact that things are happening slowly. We are seeing innovation that's actually drastic innovations, and we're looking at it as a normal thing. But if you think about it, look at 20 years and looking at it right now, it will be different things. Artificial intelligence will go into every single thing that we do, every single element, every single job. We're having a discussion earlier. We can argue essentially that any job, absolutely any job, could be replaced with an artificial intelligence system. Look, for example, at a doctor. You go to a doctor and you tell them what's wrong with you. He tried to make an assessment, try to approximately estimate what's wrong with you based on his experience, what has read. But at the same time, you go to an artificial intelligence system that has billions of people capability, brain power of billions of people. It has in the system every single research paper ever published, every single medical book ever published, billions of medical cases. Gets a drop of your blood and does millions of analyses in a microsecond. Looks at you, ascertains certain things, features about your body and face. The analysis and diagnosis will be able to give you is unparalleled to none. Nobody can match that. I can tell you the same thing about lawyers, about engineers, about accountants. The thing is going to be implemented in every single thing that we do. It's going to change everything. Right now we have primitive faces. If, for example, you go to Amazon, it starts predicting from basic algorithms what your interests are, and starts recommending things. Same thing with Netflix, recommending movies. But that technology is advancing substantially. And so it's going to have important implications in every single thing that we do in life, no question.
Any other questions?
Omar, thank you for this lecture. That was amazing. I would like to ask you how to, you spoke about how to manage risks or how to take risks. Could you please share your experience how to motivate people to take risks in their companies?
Yeah. Well, I think that has to do with the governance model in the company. For example, if you take risk and you fail, if the governance or the culture in the company is that's it, it's going to be penalized substantially for taking this risk, then people will be substantially resistant to taking risk. If we create an environment where it's acceptable to take risk as long as it's measured risk, I think people will be more open to taking risky things as long as they are measured, they are analyzed more. So it has to do substantially with the culture. If taking risk means I'll lose my job, I'll never take risk, right? But if I take risk and it's okay, I've learned from something and hopefully we'll do it better next time, I have my management support and so on, it will have big differences. So I think that is important, is the culture itself and the management and the executives to instill this kind of culture into the organization.
I wanted to ask you, you talk a lot about the technologies of the future, like artificial artificial intelligence is developing really, really fast. But lots of people are both excited and scared about it because lots of jobs will be automated, lots of functions will be automated. How to get prepared for this big change now, what we should do now in order to be successful in the future.
Yeah. So that is the million-dollar question, is we need to start thinking, putting think tanks together and say, okay, what are jobs that will only be able to be done by humans? And work with academia, to produce skills needed for these kind of things. There will always be jobs that only humans can do, no question about that. The concern that we have right now is with the diminishing amount of jobs, with the increasing amount of population, how would that look? Even the economy might look different in the future. If humans have significantly reduced role in society, how does the economy? Would people just sit down and get a check at the end of the month, or how does that work? As humans, we need to feel productive in order to feel self-satisfaction. So that we just can't be sitting down and getting a check at the end of the month. So it's an important question, and people right now are evaluating it, and we need to understand the more advanced we get, the more we understand what's going on with artificial intelligence. We need to understand this, what things can be done by humans, what things cannot be done with humans, and emphasize on the things that humans can do and create more jobs in these sectors. Also with artificial intelligence, there's going to be a point where things become so smart, where algorithms, artificial intelligence can actually change the algorithms, modify the algorithms without human intervention. Now at that point, that's going to be a paradigm shift. That's when things start getting scary. So we need to start thinking about it today and have maybe things to prevent that from happening, and have maybe safety guidelines to do that. Otherwise, it might be scary. So it's something that will help us, will have huge help for humanity. At the same time, we need to pay attention that we don't go away too far from our control.
Thank you. All right. The next question.
Thank you very much for your speech. And a little bit personal question. What is your biggest interest or field that interests you the most? For example, if you would give advice to your daughter, what that would be?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting question, because that means, depend. I have two daughters, so one is older, one is younger. So the older will have different things than the younger one. The younger one, I have no idea what's going to happen when she goes to college. So whatever I tell her is going to be irrelevant. Because like I said, in 10 years, most of the things we have, the jobs, don't even exist today. So whatever I say is going to be completely irrelevant. The new one, I think, the technology is in the next maybe 10 years or so, it's going to be advancing, but not drastically. So we can still actually have normal jobs, normal things. We're talking about 25, 30, 40, 50 years from now. It's going to be the biggest impact, when things are going to be substantially different from today. So depending on how close they are to graduating, what jobs market. In the near future, I don't think we have any issues. It's interesting to go to these hard sciences. We encourage people, we do speeches. Look at this conference, this is doing an amazing thing in promoting science, people to go to the science, technology, engineering, math, because these will be the people, that will be fueling the next economies, the future jobs. And if we don't actually encourage young kids to do these jobs and go to these difficult degrees, then the whole economy will suffer, right? And we'll have problems with that. So we need to emphasize more on for kids and the value from going to schools and studying the difficult sciences.
All right, thank you. I believe that, not to get very exhaustive, we will have a couple of questions and then continue in the...
Yeah, exactly. After we finish, I'm available here, so we can talk
right.
as long as we need.
One question here, one question here. Okay.
Firstly, thank you so much for coming, and my question is connected to the innovation part. So what would be your forecast for the next not obvious innovation? Like, we all expect self-driving cars, we all expect some advanced analytics for medicine, but some things that we cannot imagine now.
Yeah. So you know how the smartphones actually disrupted so many industries. Disrupted the music industry, the camera industry, the GPS, the gaming industry, and it became a paradigm shift in the things we communicate. So these smartphones that people have in the next 15, 20 years will be completely different. It will be something, will be wearable somehow. I can't tell you exactly how it's going to look like, because I don't know, but it's going to be something more embedded in us. So that thing will be disrupted itself. And that will be interesting to see, because that will be something, the next future of how do we communicate with each other. It will be very fascinating.
All right, and let's have the last question.
Mar, I heard your presentations earlier and different questions. So many questions were asked regarding innovation, but I wanted to ask regarding space. So about your ISU program, you mentioned earlier yesterday that it's important to be collaborative, and international community is really important, and also that there are legal aspects when, for example, you get a satellite in space, and for example, who gets the record. So just maybe mention how ISU is important in having this international collaboration.
Okay, so thanks for bringing that point. So my latest assignment, actually, I'm currently the executive director for the Space Studies program as part of ISU. So the Space Studies program actually is a program, it runs about 9 weeks, and it's an interdisciplinary program that teaches you everything that has to do with space. So when you go to university, for example, you choose to learn engineering, or you choose to learn business, or you choose to learn anything. So the interdisciplinarity of the program, it teaches you anything that has to do with space. It goes through science, through engineering, through math, through business, through legal, through policies. So you learn all the elements. It gives you a completely round-up approach to all elements in education that has to do with space. And from that, you know, it's life-changing, because most of the people end up taking the program, end up working in the space industry. About 80% of the people end up working there. This year we had 26 countries and 212 participants. And then the value from that is, we're talking about, is nowadays all the businesses are interconnected internationally. So the more connections, the more networks you have, the more successful your company will be. So by going to that university and having this program, the connections and networks and alliances possibly in the future will completely have huge benefits for you. Every year it happens in a different place. We just did it in Cork in Ireland, and next summer it's going to happen in Netherlands, actually, in Delft. So if anybody's interested in applying to the program, let me know. I'll give you more information. It will be something that will change your life for sure. I guarantee you that. Well, thank you once again, and I'm going to be here. If anybody has more questions, I'll be more than happy to talk to you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.